This week's reading about hearing loss depicts two different models. The first model is the medical model, where the medical profession views deafness as a disability and the need to fix it. Many ways that they fix it are with a cochlear implant, speech therapy, or with hearing aids. The other method is the contrast view. The social model is the opposite view of the medical model. And by this I mean they don't view deafness as a disability. Rather, they have their own way of communicating, their own organizations, and their own way of living in their society. They don't feel like they're missing something not being in the hearing world. The historical recap as shown in the PBS video illustrates the medical model. It views deafness as a disability, and that those who are deaf simply want to hear. Science and technology has developed what's called the cochlear implant. So I ask this question. If your child was born deaf, would you offer them a cochlear implant? Or would you raise them in a deaf community? Would you think that having hearing and the social skills, or the oralist view of not using sign language, would help your child? A cochlear implant is an invasive surgery which allows technology to offer hearing to those who are deaf or severely impaired. I think that if I had a child who was born deaf, I would be quick to opt for the cochlear implant. And the reason I would do a cochlear implant is simply because I grew up in the hearing world. But upon reflection and thought, I would think you need to merge both worlds. They need to have a connection with their deaf community and need to know how to communicate, because once the cochlear implant is turned off, they are deaf.
In natural hearing, sound waves strike the eardrum, which cause it to vibrate, which sends the bones in the inner ear into motion. Fluid in the inner ear or cochlea then transfers this motion to tiny hair cells, creating electrical impulses which are sent to the brain via the hearing nerve. If there is damage to the inner ear, it may result in severe to profound hearing loss. The Nucleus 5 cochlear implant system is designed to mimic the functions of the human ear. The Nucleus system's external component, the behind-the-ear sound processor, captures sound, converts it into digital signals, and transfers the digital signals to the internal implant. The signals are then converted into electrical energy and sent to an electrode array in the cochlea. Here, the electrodes on the electrode array directly stimulate the hearing nerve, bypassing the damaged part of the ear. Unlike a hearing aid that simply amplifies sound, cochlear implants send sound directly to the hearing nerve and onto the brain.
I learned this today. According to YouTube, that means, hello, my name is Lauren. What was most interesting about sign language is the comparison to other ethnic groups. The deaf culture was seen as its own linguistic minority. They had their own language, and they had their own community. They felt more comfortable being in a group of people just like themselves. What I found most interesting in the Perkins video about deaf blindness is the idea about tactile sign language. I've always been curious at how people who are deaf and blind can communicate. My relationship with both the deaf and the blind community is extremely minimal. I've only ever interacted with the blind in public, when I see them walking down the street or on the train going to work. I've also only seen one girl in my college campus who is blind who happened to live in my dorm, but I didn't know her on a personal basis. As far as those who are deaf, the only person I know who was deaf in my class had a cochlear implant in middle school. Until I took this course, I never really identified him as being part of the deaf community, but rather he was part of the hearing world. He read lips very well and could communicate using speech. I said several times before, in my reflection blogs and in the comments that I wrote on your page, I am not an educator. I am nowhere near being involved in the education field, so I truly admire all the hard work you guys do. You adapt lesson plans and you think of creative ideas to involve everyone in the class, and you strongly focus on being an inclusive classroom. At first, I would be partial to think that an inclusive classroom doesn't work for someone who has a severe hearing loss or is blind. I think that other students in the mainstream classroom will get behind because there would have to be accommodations. I think that a bilingual class where the main language would be American Sign Language and the second language would be English, or as we saw in the other reading about disability, the idea of a special ed classroom for those who are blind might be wise. But for those who have a cochlear implant, I have a different perspective, only because I've experienced it. As I mentioned earlier, a fellow classmate of mine in middle school had a cochlear implant. He sat in the front row, and I sat next to him. He read lips very well, and the teacher wore a microphone and knew not to face the board when giving instructions or giving a lesson. He did very well in school, and we have lost contact when we separated in high school when he chose a private institution. He did not choose a deaf school, however, because he did not know American Sign Language. But next is a video of an inclusive mainstream classroom. I think it really depicts what it could be like to mainstream. And I understand that every IEP is different.
Guys, welcome back. Monday morning. Hope everybody had a great weekend.
For a child with hearing loss, no matter how good the technology is, they're listening through a damaged auditory system. We need to help them to hear what's happening in the classroom. If they don't hear the teacher, if they don't hear the questions and comments from other kids in the classroom, they're going to miss a significant amount of what happens, and that's not fair to them. We have to remember that classrooms are very noisy places. For a child to hear well in the classroom, we need to give them some special assistance. The first example we're going to show you today is to help you understand what a child with a hearing loss hears in the classroom with an FM system and what he would hear if we didn't turn the FM system on.
So let's get it going.
The teacher in this classroom has forgotten to put on his FM microphone. Without the microphone turned on, it's almost impossible for a child with a hearing loss to hear clearly. Let's listen to what a child with a hearing loss will hear with the FM unit turned off. Without an FM system on, the child is going to be hearing very muffled speech, or like they're listening from a very great distance. Forgetting to turn on the FM system can happen to anybody, but don't count on the student to tell you if it's not working. Look for visual clues that he's confused, or watch the student trying to look around to see what's happening in the classroom. After a quick check, the teacher can turn on the microphone, check with the student, and make sure that all is working well.
Okay, good.
That gets the student back on track and gets the lesson going in the right direction.
You sounding okay now? Okay. So
once the FM system is turned on, the student is hearing as if the teacher was standing right next to his ear.
Generated a list of which jobs were important to know geography.
Making sure that the FM system works is the responsibility of both the teachers and the students. The students are responsible for advocating for themselves and should be encouraged to say something when the FM system either isn't working or is working poorly. As long as they can hear, they can compete.
The more interesting part about this week's reading has taught me that those who are educators who take the time to not only accommodate every single student in their classroom, but to also cater to the individual needs of every student and to learn how to make them learn the best is truly astonishing. I want to give the biggest round of applause to all the educators out there who are taking the time to revise lesson plans, to take extra courses in their master program, and to do anything they can to help those who have a disability be in a mainstream classroom. Times have changed when there needs to be completely segregated schools and asylums for people with disabilities to have. I just want to give you all just a round of applause. And those who have a disability, and those who work with those who have disabilities, and those who have experience with disabilities, you guys are the best. I give you the biggest courage and bravery award because I don't think I could go through all those hours of therapy and working 12 times as hard to just be considered the same as everyone else. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my video.